Okay, there we go. Good. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead, have your notes out. We're going to continue looking at wrapping up with England, and then we're going to turn our attention to the rest of Europe during the time of the Protestant Reformation. Drama. And then ultimately turn our attention to nearby France. France, one of the most important countries in Europe, and a rival to Britain, to see how they're going to handle the whole Protestant Reformation, where they decided that, hey, maybe everyone should not necessarily be part of the same religion that is going on in Europe. Okay? So you guys ready for it? All right, let's do this. Where last we left off, we were looking at Elizabeth. Okay? You got some good notes about Elizabeth? You got a lot of notes about Elizabeth? Who was her dad? Yes? Who was her mom? Anne Boleyn. Who was her half-brother? No. Arthur was Henry VIII's half-brother. Who was her half-brother? That was her brother-in-law. Who was her half-brother? And you know what a half-brother means. Same dad, different mom. Edward, very good. Who was her half-sister? Very good. How many of her half-siblings were monarchs? All of them. How many is all? You're right. 2. That's right. Very good. Yes? The board, yes. We don't have a date yet for that. I'm anticipating that we're going to do a quiz on Chapter 16. I haven't got a date for it. I'll give you guys about a couple of weeks' notice at least to do that. Okay? It'll be another 20.1, so you'll have an opportunity to read through and prepare. And actually, for this class, those of you guys who were here, and for the other one, I was actually really pleased because I give pretty much the same quiz year after year after year. And I would say, on the whole, this group, what are you guys, class of 2024? Don't get all like, full-headed or whatever, but you guys did really well on that, okay? And I think it helped that you took it very seriously and you really focused in. And yeah, I mean, you really read it for good care. That's going to be very important because we got one more quiz coming up in this unit. I think we may have one in the next unit. Next semester, we got quite a few because we're doing U.S. history, a lot of U.S. history, and there's a lot of stuff in the book there, and that really dovetails very nicely with what we're doing. So I'll give you more details and a handout coming up soon, okay? But for right now, keep your focus on what we've got going on here, which is Elizabeth. Did we say she was successful? Yes, make sure you write that down. She was successful. Vinny, why was she successful? That was one reason. You got that? Now, it's an interesting thing because some people look back and they're like, whatever. She could have made Anglican, like her father, Church of England, a Protestant, although very close to Catholic as far as a religion, or she could have done Catholic. Let me just go back to you, Vinny. Why was it that when her sister, Mary, made the Catholic faith the official Church of England, the official faith for England, why did that not go over so well? Was it something about the beliefs of the Catholics or how it was implemented in the country? Tell me, what was one of the things that Mary, how she implemented it, that really caused some problems? She'd execute people, okay? And like just average people? No, some higher ups. And when you start executing like higher up people, they're kind of like, wow, thanks a lot there, Queen. Okay, because if you get to be a bishop, okay, a bishop is a very important person within the church from a noble family, because bishop positions and nobles and so forth, they were all kind of from the same like higher up families. Mary was too overbearing with respect to religion. She could have been mild. Was Elizabeth mild, tolerant when it came to religion? What would you say? Yeah, more like her dad that way. I mean, some people would go, hey, it's not toleration if you're putting in a religion we don't like. But would she kill you outright if you were Catholic? Would she kill you for any other reason? Why would she kill you? Why did she have Mary, Queen of Scots, executed? Treason, yeah, it was treason. What did Mary, Queen of Scots ever do to her? We covered this last time. What did Mary, Queen of Scots... Who was it? You were Mary, Queen of Scots, or you were Mary, Queen of Scots? You were Mary, Queen of Scots. Who was Queen Elizabeth? You were. What did she ever do to you? Oh, that. She wanted to kill you. And how did you find out that she wanted to kill you? Who was the spy master in here? Yeah, I was assigning roles. I mean, good grief, you're the spy master. How did you figure out that she wanted to kill her? Mary wanted to kill her cousin. Yeah, you did. You pranked her. You did. That was a very dangerous big prank. Okay? So Elizabeth, make sure you have this in notes, is very tolerant as far as what people, their religion was. Remember, what was the quote? What was the quote I had you write down? Lovely. You got the exact words that I gave you. Don't make windows into men's souls. So she doesn't really want to like find out what's really going on in your heart of hearts. Okay? But she's interested in loyalty. Okay? So, how did she get along? How did she get along with nobles in England? How did Elizabeth get along with nobles in England? She worked with them. Okay? Which is a pretty smart thing to do. Because in Britain at that time, and we'll develop this a little bit more, they'll have what is going to be referred to ultimately as a constitutional monarchy, as opposed to a monarch, absolute monarch. I am the ruler, everything I say goes. France and Spain and some other countries had rulers like that. In Britain, it was more power sharing. And so that's why, going back to Mary, that's why Mary was not as popular. It wasn't so much the ideas behind the Catholic faith, it was how she implemented them in the country. She was not very tolerant. Okay? So, who came onto the throne after Elizabeth died? After many, many, many... Oh, and by the way, if you don't have this written in your notes, make sure you have it in there. Elizabeth's dad was wrong. And the nobles were wrong. Becca, what were they wrong about? What stereotype were they really, really wrong about? That women can't rule. Did Elizabeth prove that wrong? In how many different ways did she prove that wrong? A lot of different ways. She helped her country to be successful. And actually, let me back it up here. Because when Mary, Queen of Scots was executed, right, we had the Spanish Armada sent by King Philip II of Spain. He's like, man, I'm mad. You killed Mary, Queen of Scots, and you're going to pay. And the English were able to fight it off successfully in this naval battle. In your notes, I make a reference to what are called privateers. Put this down. The English had, over many years, developed a lot of success in sailing ships. And you kind of have to have success in sailing ships because, have you ever noticed, England, part of Britain, it's an island. If you want to get anywhere, you have to get in boats and go places. You can't just exclusively like hang out on the island. And by the way, if you want to defend that island, you need guys with boats. And call it a navy. Privateers were English men who had boats. And we call them privateers because they knew how to get in and around on the ocean, and they were doing various different things, and eventually they're going to help participate to defend England against the Spanish Armada. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because we haven't developed the full package of Europe discovering America and taking advantage of America. I'll make it short and sweet for you. You ready? Spain ends up taking over most of the Americas. What is one thing that Spain wants to get out of the Americas that's very valuable, that you can dig out of the ground? Yeah, gold and silver. And they would load them up on ships, the gold and silver on Spanish ships, and they would bring it back to Spain. Hello, Although, what would happen if some Spanish ships came across some English privateers? They would take them, yeah. What's another word for privateer? It says so in the handout that I gave you. Pirates, exactly. Write that down. It's very interesting. And Elizabeth was okay with privateers and pirates. That was from the original handout. Yeah, it's the same original handout. So if you're following along with this, because it's always good, and you're like, how much are we going to do? If we're like on the top of page 2, right? We've got fourth bullet point, Elizabeth's English privateers, a.k.a. pirates, versus Philip II's Spanish Armada. And actually, in that respect, Elizabeth supporting a bunch of English guys who are raiding in the Atlantic Ocean, stealing Spanish gold and silver, that seems like she's encouraging like criminals. But they're English, so they can't be criminal if they're preying upon the Spanish. And eventually, some of those guys are going to help defend her country against a Spanish naval invasion. So, what might be one person's pirate is another person's privateer. Got that? Very clever, Elizabeth. That was one of the sources of tension between her country and Spain. And of course, the irony is, what is England really going to be focusing on? Write this down, because we're going to develop this well into next semester. What England is really focusing on isn't so much conflicts and so forth in Europe. England has got its attention turned to the Americas, right? What was the name of the first colony that England established? What was the name of the first colony that England established in North America? Jamestown, which is located ultimately in a larger colony called what? Virginia, named after who?
Virgin Mary.
No, not the Virgin Mary. No, not the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Queen, who is? Elizabeth, exactly. Very good. Elizabeth is the Virgin Queen. Next semester, I've got a really cool research project for you guys. I do this every year with the 9th graders. Every one of you will have an individual separate film, and you will do research onto what is true and what is not true. It's actually pretty cool. Elizabeth is a film starring Cate Blanchett, who, if you're into the Lord of the Rings series, she plays the elf queen. She's a really good actress. She does a really nice job on a film called Elizabeth. And then a later one, in the later Elizabeth years, I think it's called Elizabeth the Golden Years and so forth. It's always fascinating because does it tell the 100% accurate story of Elizabeth? No, it throws a lot of drama in there, although I tell you what, there's a lot of drama in the story of Elizabeth to begin with. I showed you that one clip last time. I'll play the trailer for it for you guys right now before we move on to the next one. I think the trailer is interesting because you get a little bit of a sense right here at the beginning. It starts out in the trailer with a scene of what life was like under Queen Mary. Oh, you couldn't quite see it. Let's back it up here a little bit. Oh, here we go. These are 3 people from a bird's eye point of view. These 3 people are bound with each other. And what is this around them? Yeah, it's fuel, it's wood. What's going to happen to them? They're going to be, oh, there we go, toasty, toasty, yeah. Yeah, turn up the heat, yeah, not too much. Yeah, they're going to be, this is during the time of Bloody Mary. So these are Protestants who are going to be executed and so forth. That is going on before Elizabeth comes onto the throne. Very dramatic, and then we'll get back into... Oh dear, 1554. That's a Catholic noble who wants Elizabeth out of the way. That is her very good friend who she can't get married to because he's already married. Well, and then he's not married, but then it's complicated. That's Walsingham. But she will survive.
All these matters, if you would agree to marry.
I may be a woman, but if I choose, I have the heart of a man. I will have one mistress here. And no master.
Who does she choose as her husband? No one.
Body and person are no longer her own property. On Thursday,
I am my father's daughter.
Oh,
I'm not afraid of anything.
there she is. All in white. All in white. The innocent, the Virgin Queen. And as I told you last time, she could not be like careless in her intimate relations like her father had been. Because if she gets pregnant, yeah, that's very clear evidence. If her father got somebody else pregnant, he can always go, I didn't do nothing. I have no involvement there. So, we'll pick up more in England with who takes over after Elizabeth. But who takes over after Elizabeth? Did I tell you that? She doesn't have any kids. And her cousin, who was going to take over after her, Mary Queen of Scots, she's dead. Who takes over? No. If you marry into the royal family, you don't necessarily inherit the authority. You have to be born into it. Mary Queen of Scots' son. Mary Queen of Scots' son. His name is James VI of Scotland. In other words, there were 5 previous kings of Scotland named James. He will be James I of England. He's the first monarch in British history to be the king of Scotland in the north, as well as England in the south. And so he literally will take the throne. Up in Scotland, it's like this thing, it's called the Stone of Scone. It's this big sort of like rock. But all the kings had that up in Scotland as part of their throne. He will take it to London. He'll tuck it in underneath the English throne, and he'll sit in London and be king of both. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it was actually fascinating. Let me ask you this question. Who's the monarch in England today? Elizabeth. Elizabeth what? The first or the second? In England, she's the second. What is she in Scotland? Has there ever been a Queen Elizabeth in Scotland? When we had this Elizabeth, what area did she rule? Just England, yeah. Not Scotland. And so this is always an interesting thing because Queen Elizabeth of England is also the Queen of Scotland. What do we call her in England? Queen Elizabeth II. What is she up in Scotland? Queen Elizabeth I. It's always fascinating because the Scottish people, if you get a little bit of a sense of this, there's some tension between the Scots and the English. And so they were having some celebration, and they posted it up in Scotland, "Welcome Queen Elizabeth II." And some Scottish person got up there and scratched out the second part because they're like, hey, we've never had a Queen Elizabeth before. So we'll keep an eye on this guy. You can make just a little note of this. This is fascinating because here he is with Mary, his mother, who was removed, and he's raised by relatives. And that's always an interesting outfit. That was the outfit that he wore and so forth. And you're like, anyway, it's very frilly and so forth. And that's his outfit as a little young king of Scotland. And he is going to be more, arguably, like Elizabeth than he will be like his mother. You can write that down. The next monarch of England, who will combine the two, Scotland and England to a degree, is he going to change the Church of England to be Catholic again? No. Okay? No. And in fact, up in Scotland, the main religion up there is Protestant. And so he doesn't make any of the mistakes that his mom did, and he will remain king of Scotland, and he will remain king of England. And in fact, one of the things he does he actually sort of looks around, he's like, hey, you know what? We need a new translation of the Bible. We got all these old translations and so forth. Let's have a new, spunky, modern language translation of the Bible. So he orders all these smart people to get together and come up with a version of the Bible. What are they going to call that Bible? The King James Version of the Bible, exactly. Which is kind of like timeless. The King James Version of the Bible will be put together during the time of King James. Okay? So, is it modern, the language? It was back then. Nowadays, people would look to it and go, these and thous and this and so forth. It looks like it's back in the 1600s, but that's okay. That was a long time ago. All right? All right, let's go move on. Let's move on. Let's check in for a moment. All right? Write this down in your notes so that we can check in and see how's the Protestant Reformation doing in Europe at this time. After a while, after you got Luther, and you got the Calvinists, and then we've got Henry VIII, and Mary, and then Elizabeth, and James, how are things going? Let's take a look and see. And you can write down in your notes what these various places are, because we're going to see some areas for some potential tension. Okay? Let's start in the southern part here, Portugal and Spain. You can write this down. Portugal and Spain. Let's see, green and Greenland, Catholic. There we go. Portugal, Spain, Catholic, right? In fact, if you wanted to do anything like not Catholic in Spain at that time, forget about it. They had a thing called the Spanish Inquisition, the government and the church working closely together. No Protestants, like they would even have a chance to get in there. They also kicked out all the Muslims and Jews that happened to be still in Spain at the time. So Spain is a very, very Catholic area. No surprise here, what we call Italy, the Papal States, and those areas, Catholic too. Got that? Catholic. I mean, the Pope, that's a strong Catholic area. And then we see, it's interesting because then you start seeing like these lines. Where you see the lines, that's where you have sort of a mixed population. Green, you can see, is going to be very important. There's going to be Catholics throughout much of the rest of Europe. In fact, if you're looking for another area of Europe that's almost predominantly Catholic, you'd have to go up to Ireland. Do you see Ireland? Go ahead and write it down. Ireland, as in Irish Catholic. How many of you guys got some Irish heritage? Undoubtedly, many, not all, because there is going to be some from Ireland that will be Protestant, but many of the Catholics that make their way to this country, of the Irish that make their way to this country, are going to be Catholic. Okay? Now, here we go. Let's take a look here. England, Anglican. There we go. Anglican, Church of England. Is that Protestant? Trick question. Yes. It's Protestant. How is it not Protestant? Yeah, it's not as much of some of the Protestant ideals and so forth. Okay? The priests get married, there's no pope, but a lot of the other things are fairly similar to that. Oh, now let's look at let's see, which one should we go to next? Purple, Calvinist. Then the Calvinist. We got a lot of Calvinists up in Scotland. Okay, so the Calvinists up in Scotland. And we got a lot of Calvinists in the Netherlands, the Dutch. Sometimes people refer to one of the largest provinces in the Netherlands as Holland. Okay, so we got a lot of Calvinists there. We got a fair number of Calvinists in Switzerland. Okay, but if you look at that, though, you'll see a lot of diagonal purple lines. Put this down. France, because we're going to spend some time talking about France coming up here. France is a mix. And it's a potentially combustible mix. This thing is going to end up exploding. You've got a lot of Calvinists, especially in the south. And then you've got the major religion in France is Catholic. Got that? What about way up here in the north? This is kind of easy. Norway, Sweden, Denmark. That's pink. That's a Protestant religion. That's Lutheran. Those kings up there go full-on Lutheran, so they're going to be Lutheran. Although there's a fair number of Lutheran throughout northern Europe as well, mixed in with Catholics. We're going to see that's going to be potentially quite combustible too. When you get way over here, light green is Muslim. You got that in the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. And orange, that's the Orthodox religion. So just by looking at the map, you can see those areas were already Orthodox, although you do get some mixing and so forth there. Right? Quite different from before the Protestant Reformation. Let's see. What should the Catholics do? Oh, we need to talk about the Anabaptists. You ready? Let's talk about the Anabaptists. They actually got them listed right here. In this sort of green area, Anabaptist. A-N-A and then Baptist, B-A-P-T-I-S-T. Anabaptist. When you talk about Catholic Church, there's one Catholic Church. When you talk about Protestant denominations, Protestant groups, there's quite a few. Anglican, Calvinist, Lutheran, etc., etc. Let's talk about the Anabaptists. They're an example. Anabaptists. They're like Protestants, only more so. How can you be more so? Well, I'll tell you what. The Anabaptists are going to take a position that's ultimately going to make them, write this down, the Catholics hate them. I mean, the Pope and the Catholic kings and so forth, they hate the Anabaptists. But guess what? Other Protestants are going to hate them too. They managed to take a position, a religious position, that's going to make them very unpopular among lots of different people of faith in Europe. And it's going to be very dangerous for them. These Anabaptists will say, for example, well, you know what? Everything's going to happen now. Christ is going to return in our lifetime, boom, and we need to be ready for it. So they're seeing the times as being very important, very present, and people need to make changes and so forth. One of the things that they kind of get the name Anabaptist from one of their particular religious beliefs, and that is, are you ready for it? Adult baptism. What? Adult baptism, as opposed to child baptism. You're like, what? Within the Catholic faith and also the Protestant faiths, they believe that baptism is very important. A public acclamation of your belief in Jesus Christ. Fair enough. And they would say, without that, going to heaven is just really not possible. Well, then some people were thinking, well, can you go to heaven before you're baptized? The Catholic Church and a lot of the Protestant churches was like, no. So when do you get baptized? As an infant. And in fact, it was very, very, very commonly practiced to have infants baptized. In the Catholic Church, all. And that was very important because, as we've seen, life is pretty precious and life can be very short. And you have these kids that are born and they might not live very long. And how do you know that they're going to go to heaven? Well, they take care of that. They would make sure to get the priest there in time and baptize the kid. And so therefore, they're baptized. Now, would the kid make an acclamation that they are a believer in Jesus Christ? It's kind of hard if you're a little kid. Well, the Anabaptists said, no, forget about it. You can only be baptized when you are old enough to know what you're talking about. Does that make sense? Which is very different from the way things had gone in Europe at that time. Now, it was interesting because the places, among the religions and so forth, that would do infant baptism, they would still have, obviously it's like you're baptized as an infant, and then there would be instruction and so forth, and then there would be things like a confirmation or like a commitment when you get older, that is the position that you're in. Does that kind of make sense? Well, I'll tell you what. The Anabaptists felt very strongly about their views, and they're like, we're going to take charge. And one place in history they really particularly took charge and got a lot of attention, they took over the city of Munster. Let me go back here for a moment and they don't have it marked here, but it's right here. I know. I went there with my wife when we were on our honeymoon. We stayed with lots of different friends in all kinds of different places in Europe, and we stayed in Munster. We had some friends from Germany there. Munster, write this down, M-U-N-S-T-R, Munster. It was a Catholic city. It was under the control of the Catholic Church. The guy who was in charge there was the Bishop of Munster. I think maybe even the Archbishop, which is even higher. Okay? And here's what the Anabaptists did. They took over. For a while, they took over the city. They're like, We are here taking over the city. We are preparing for the arrival of Jesus Christ and the second coming, and everything's going to come together. I mean, they were very, very adamant about that. They were militant. They were militant about it. The Lutherans, the Calvinists, they weren't very happy about the Anabaptists. And the Catholics were really furious with the Anabaptists. And eventually the Catholics would put together a force and they would recapture Munster. And I remember going to Munster on that trip and looking, here is the cathedral. They had the big, beautiful cathedral, that was built by the Catholics during that time period. And way up high, can you see that? 3 metal cages. You can still see them there. I took pictures. This is somebody else's picture. But you get 3 metal cages. What do you have 3 metal cages on the outside of a cathedral? Does that add to, is it a beautiful addition to the art and architecture of that? No. What do you suppose what those 3 metal cages were for? To imprison the Anabaptist rebel leaders. How would you like to be imprisoned in a metal cage way, way up high on the high steeple of the cathedral? I'm like, when are they ever going to come down? They didn't. They were put up there to die. Slow, painful deaths. And this is a message to all the people in that community. Don't try and do this again. In fact, I always wondered, it's like, well, why don't they take them down in modern times? I mean, hello? Are they trying to send a message to, modern people of that particular faith? Don't mess with us in Munster, or you're going to end up in that cage there, right? Uh-huh. I don't think so. It's just sort of like it's there, it's still there, and so forth. Now, here's an interesting component about the Anabaptists. You can write this down. Anabaptists are not going to be so much known as Anabaptists today. After they ran into some serious headwinds, some serious difficulties, they took a much lower profile. Do you understand what I'm saying, lower profile? Those that were still Anabaptists that hadn't been killed or defeated and so forth, they kind of hang out in parts of the Netherlands, and they in the rural areas, and they keep it really quiet, and it's just they're no, let's not mess with anyone. In fact, put this down. They take a position of nonviolence. In fact, you could not get them to go participate in a war. They're against warfare. They're not going to participate. You understand what I'm saying? They're not going to participate in war. And they managed to survive. And eventually, some of them are going to come over to the United States of America. You've got some in Europe, and some will settle in the United States of America. They're in fact, even before the United States of America is founded, they'll come over and they're like, we just want to settle in an area where we can do our own thing. And they're going to follow the name of a leader named Menon. And they will be known as the Mennonites. And some of them will be known as the Amish. And you can go to places in the United States like Indiana and Pennsylvania and so forth and see the Mennonites and the Amish. And you look and you're like, they actually quite distinguish themselves. Anybody know? Raise your hand if you can tell me. How could you tell a Mennonite or somebody of the Amish faith as opposed to just somebody else who was living in Pennsylvania area? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very simple technology. Yeah, that's going to be part of their creed. Very simple technology dating back pretty much to the time that we're looking at right here. And the clothes will be very simple and not ornate. And so you're not going to see that. They're going to be in their buggies. Okay, they're not going to be in their Chevrolets or anything like that. Okay, so that's an interesting feature. You got all kinds of different Protestant things going on and the Catholic things going on. But yeah, I wanted to point out, for the Amish, the Anabaptists, it was pretty dramatic. They will survive. They're not going to be taking over any more cities. Okay? Jesuits. Let's talk about Jesuits, because we're going to be talking a fair amount about Jesuits as we move on here. Who the heck are Jesuits? Catholics. Okay? Catholics. They're Catholic priests. Within the Catholic faith, you have a lot of different orders. Franciscan order of monks, Benedictine order of monks, Cistercian order of monks. During the time of the Protestant Reformation, write it down, a new group of monks, Jesuits, also known as the Society of Jesus. They're a new group that come up during the time of the Protestant Reformation. And they're going to be part of what is known as the, see if I got the thing there. No, not that. That's something else. The Counter-Reformation. Ooh, the return of the Catholics. The Catholics fight back. The Counter-Reformation. The Pope and leading Catholics are going to say, look, in fact, let's go back to the map here. We've lost a lot of territory to Protestants. Write this down. Poland. There are a lot of Protestants, Calvinists, and Lutherans hanging out in Poland. And the Pope's going to say, all right, we need to get this turned around. We need to do a better job of what we're doing. The Catholics stick to their faith. Yes, we've got the Pope. Ours is the true faith. Okay, enough of the indulgent stuff. That didn't work out as well for us. But all the other stuff we're going to stick to. And priests, write this down, the priests and monks, it was like they weren't being educated well enough. So now we need to educate those guys. They need to know what it really means to be a Catholic priest. And in fact, what is going to be the newest, coolest, on-fire group of priests? It's going to be the Jesuits. You know, the Benedictines and the Franciscans and the Cistercians and so forth, those were from previous times. Now the Jesuits are in there, and they are going to get schooled. And not only get schooled and focus on education, they're going to get out there and they're going to teach it and they're going to preach it and they're going to try and, get this, reclaim areas that were lost to the Catholics and make them Catholic again. Okay? So these are some of the Jesuits. I mean, if you go pretty far, you're like, hey, Jesuit, we got a job for you. Hey, okay. We want you to reclaim England. Okay. How are you going to do that? Going to go talk to all the people of England? No. Here, why don't you go kill Queen Elizabeth? Oh, okay, well, that'll take care of it pretty quick. So sometimes if they're like really, really going, they might be involved in some of the, not educational methods, but other persuasion. They will reclaim Poland. Write that down. When you go to Poland, you're going to see that that is going to end up being predominantly Catholic again. Most definitely Catholic again. Another area. They're going to go overseas. In fact, this is going to be what Jesuits are going to be most known for. They're going to go overseas. We haven't gotten to it yet. The Spanish exploration, the Portuguese exploration. When we get to South America and Central America, those are going to end up under the control of Spain, and when it comes to Brazil, Portugal. And who's going to go over there and talk to the local population and work at converting the local population to Christianity? Jesuits. And which form of Christianity are they going to be advocating for? Catholic, exactly. In fact, you can look and they're like, well, I think they were pretty successful. What is the number one Christian faith in Central and Latin America, Central and South America? Catholic, yeah. Okay. So, they'll play a very important role. France. Ooh. You want some more drama? Let's talk about drama. Let's go to France. You ready? France. A big country. Right by England, right by Spain, not too far from Italy. France. They've got monarchs. France. They've got monarchs. And where do those monarchs live? What's the capital city of France? Paris. Up in the north. It's important that you note that. Paris is up in the north. Paris is up in the north. And by the time we get a little ways into the Protestant Reformation and so forth, you're going to look and they're like, that map tells me there's a lot of Catholics there. But, put this down, in the south, there's a lot of Protestants. In fact, we need to give those Protestants a particular name. In France, they're Calvinists, but we're not going to call them Calvinists. Make sure I get the spelling right. We'll call them Huguenots, or Huguenots, depending on how you pronounce that. For some reason, in France, the Calvinists are called Huguenots. Got that? No worries. So, how do they feel about being in a Catholic country? They're not too cool about it. But you know what? Depends on how the king is, right? If you had Bloody Mary in charge of France, what would she like to do to all those Protestants down there in the southern parts, in the purple areas in particular? What would she like to do to them? She'd like to, yeah, she would like to take them out. Mary, Queen of Scots, her family was from the northern part, the very, very Catholic area. So she is like part of this sort of, she was part of like the ultra-Catholic group in France. But here's the deal. Whoops, I'm going to get to that one yet. Here's the deal. They had a king in France who was Catholic, and his name was Henry. And Henry III. And he was like, okay, our country is officially Catholic, but you know what? I'm not that interested in having a fight with all those Protestants in the South. I don't know whether he was lazy or just not, whatever. I mean, he was just like, just let it be. Oh my gosh, let it be. But put this down. Ultra-Catholics. They called it the Catholic League. There were ultra-Catholics in France, and they wanted their country to be like Spain. In Spain, was there any toleration for non-Catholics? Heck no. The ultra-Catholics are like, we need to have our country all Catholic. So they took matters into their own hands. And here's what they did. At a city called Vassy, in the south of France, one day when the Protestants were coming home from church, let's see if I got the date on that. I want to double check and see if I got, 1572. 1572. They're coming home from church, and they run into difficulty. It's called a massacre. Yeah. The Catholics had organized and carried out a massacre of Huguenot Protestant church worshipers. Got that? So basically they were saying, okay, King, if you're not going to do anything about the fact that there's Protestants in this country, we are going to do something about it. Well, if you had been to church in the south of France and you managed to survive a massacre, what would you do? Would you go to church the next week? Some of you might be like, no. I mean, that was kind of like the point of the massacre. We'll either kill them or prevent them from practicing their religion. If you did go, what would you bring with you the next week besides your Bible? Very good. Write that down. They started carrying weapons in the south of France. The Protestants started carrying weapons. Oh, yeah, they were carrying weapons all over the place. And, of course, then the ultra-Catholics said to the king, oh, my gosh, look at those guys. They're really dangerous. I told you they were dangerous. How are they dangerous? You're the one that was attacking them. Oh, my gosh, look at them. They've got guns now. They've got muskets. They've got weapons. You've got the potential of a major war in France. Next time we'll talk about how Henry III decides he's going to solve it by having his sister get married to the leading Protestant in the country. Yeah, we'll talk about the wedding between Henry IV and Marguerite. How did he become Henry IV? Another Henry, yes. There was actually 3 Henrys involved in that, but we'll cover that later. Okay, very good.